The crisp October morning air carried the scent of fallen leaves through the grounds of Gatcombe Park, Princess Anne's beloved estate in Gloucestershire. Inspector Jim Beaton adjusted his collar against the cool breeze and checked his watch for the third time in 10 minutes. As the princess's personal protection officer, punctuality wasn't just a habit, it was a matter of life and death. At 42 years old, Beaton had served in the Metropolitan Police for nearly 2 decades. His weathered face told stories of countless nights spent guarding dignitaries, his keen blue eyes always scanning for potential threats. Today felt different, though. He couldn't quite put his finger on why. Perhaps it was the unusual restlessness he'd noticed in the princess during their morning briefing, or maybe it was the strange phone call he'd overheard her taking in her private study. Princess Anne emerged from the main house precisely at 9 o'clock, her auburn hair catching the morning sunlight. At 24, she carried herself with the poise expected of royalty, yet there was something refreshingly unpretentious about her demeanor that Beaton had grown to respect during their 3 years working together. She wore a simple navy blazer and cream-colored trousers, practical attire for what was supposed to be a routine visit to a local charity event. "Good morning, Inspector," she said, her voice carrying a slight tension that Beaton immediately picked up on. "I trust you slept well?" "Very well, Your Royal Highness," he replied, though in truth he'd been awake since 4:30, reviewing security protocols for the day's events. "The route to the community center has been cleared and secured. We should arrive with plenty of time to spare." The princess nodded, but Beaton noticed she seemed distracted, her gaze drifting toward the winding country road that led away from the estate. As they walked toward the waiting rover, she suddenly stopped and turned to him with an expression he'd never seen before, a mixture of determination and barely concealed anxiety. "Inspector, I need to tell you something," she began, then seemed to reconsider. "Actually, perhaps it's better if I don't. Some knowledge can be a burden." Beaton felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather. In his experience, when members of the royal family started speaking cryptically, it usually meant trouble was brewing. "Your Highness, if there's anything that could affect your safety." "No, nothing like that," she said quickly, though her fingers nervously twisted the simple gold bracelet on her wrist. "It's just, sometimes duty requires us to make difficult choices, doesn't it?" Before Beaton could respond, the sound of approaching vehicles caught his attention. 2 black sedans were making their way up the long gravel drive, moving faster than was typical for official visits. His hand instinctively moved toward his radio, but the princess placed a gentle hand on his arm. "It's all right, Inspector. I was expecting them." The cars came to a stop near the main entrance, and Beaton watched with growing concern as 4 men in expensive suits emerged. They moved with the practiced efficiency of professionals, but something about their demeanor set off alarm bells in his mind. These weren't typical government officials or royal household staff. Their eyes constantly scanned the surroundings, and their jackets hung in a way that suggested concealed weapons. The eldest of the 4, a silver-haired man with piercing gray eyes, approached the princess with a respectful bow. "Your Royal Highness, thank you for agreeing to see us on such short notice." "Sir Geoffrey," the princess replied, her voice steady despite the tension Beaton could sense radiating from her. "I assume you have news. Perhaps we could speak privately?" Beaton stepped forward instinctively. "Your Highness, I must advise against any unscheduled meetings without proper security clearance." "Inspector Beaton," Sir Geoffrey interrupted smoothly, "your dedication to your duty is commendable, but this matter falls under national security. I'm sure you understand." The princess looked between the 2 men, and Beaton saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. Fear. Not the kind of fear that came from physical danger, but something deeper and more complex. "It's all right, Inspector. Please wait by the car. This won't take long." Against every instinct screaming in his head, Beaton reluctantly withdrew to a position where he could maintain visual contact while giving them privacy. He watched as the 5 figures huddled in intense conversation, noting the way the princess's shoulders gradually sagged as the discussion continued. Whatever they were telling her, it wasn't good news. 20 minutes later, Sir Geoffrey and his companions departed as suddenly as they had arrived. The princess stood alone on the gravel drive, staring after their vehicles until they disappeared beyond the estate gates. When she finally turned back toward Beaton, her face had gone pale, and her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed down her blazer. "I'm afraid we'll need to cancel today's engagement," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "Something has come up that requires immediate attention." "Of course, Your Highness. Shall I notify the community center?" "Yes, please do. And, Inspector?" She paused, meeting his eyes with an intensity that made him straighten unconsciously. "I want you to know that whatever happens today, your service has been exemplary. The royal family is fortunate to have someone of your integrity and skill protecting us." The words sounded disturbingly like a farewell, and Beaton felt his unease growing into genuine alarm. "Your Highness, is everything all right?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Everything is as it should be, Inspector. Now I believe I'll take a walk around the grounds to clear my head. The fresh air will do me good." Beaton watched as she set off toward the garden paths that wound through the estate's extensive grounds. Something was very wrong. In 3 years of protecting her, he'd never seen the princess look so troubled or speak so formally. The meeting with Sir Geoffrey and his associates had clearly delivered news that shook her to her core. He pulled out his secure radio and contacted headquarters, requesting background checks on the morning's visitors. The response came back within minutes. Classified. Whatever Sir Geoffrey represented, it was above Beaton's security clearance, which only increased his concern. For the next hour, he maintained his standard patrol routine while keeping the princess in sight as she wandered the gardens. She moved slowly, stopping frequently to stare at particular flowers or trees as if memorizing them. Occasionally, he caught her wiping at her eyes, though she was too far away for him to be certain she was crying. It was nearly noon when she finally returned to the house, her composure restored but her face still drawn with worry. "Inspector, I'd like to drive into the village. There are some personal matters I need to attend to." "Certainly, Your Highness. Shall I arrange for the usual security detail?" "No, I think just the two of us will be sufficient today. Sometimes a smaller presence is more appropriate." Beaton nodded, though privately he disagreed. Royal protection protocols called for a minimum of 3 officers for any public appearance, regardless of the circumstances. But the princess's tone brooked no argument, and he'd learned over the years that she could be remarkably stubborn when she'd made up her mind about something. They set out in the armored rover just after 12:30, taking the winding country road that connected Gatcombe Park to the nearby village of Minchinhampton. The princess sat unusually quiet in the passenger seat, her gaze fixed on the passing countryside. Normally, she would comment on the changing autumn colors or ask about his family, but today she seemed lost in her own thoughts. As they rounded a particularly sharp bend, Beaton noticed a white van parked on the shoulder ahead. His training kicked in immediately. Unusual vehicles on royal routes were always potential threats. He began to slow down, his hand moving toward his radio to report the situation. "Just drive past, Inspector," the princess said quietly. "It's nothing to be concerned about." Her words should have been reassuring, but something in her tone suggested otherwise. As they passed the van, Beaton caught a glimpse of 2 men sitting in the front seats, both watching their vehicle intently. One of them raised a hand radio to his mouth as they drove by. "Your Highness," Beaton began carefully, "I think perhaps we should consider turning back. Something doesn't feel right." "Everything is fine, Inspector. Trust me." But everything was not fine. Beaton's years of experience had taught him to read the subtle signs of danger, and every instinct he possessed was screaming warnings. The mysterious morning meeting, the princess's strange behavior, the van with men who were clearly conducting surveillance, all of it pointed toward some kind of operation in progress. They reached the village without incident, but Beaton's unease only grew as they parked near the small high street. The princess seemed to be looking for something or someone, her eyes scanning the faces of passers-by with an intensity that was completely out of character. "There," she said suddenly, pointing toward a small cafe on the corner. "I need to meet someone there." Through the cafe window, Beaton could see a young man sitting alone at a corner table. He appeared to be in his late 20s with dark hair and an athletic build. Unlike the other cafe patrons who were chatting or reading newspapers, this man sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the street outside. "Your Highness, I really must insist on knowing who this person is before you meet with him." "Protocol demands—" "Protocol," she interrupted sharply, "sometimes has to be set aside for more important considerations. Please wait here, Inspector." This won't take long. She was out of the car before he could protest further. Beaton watched helplessly as she crossed the street and entered the cafe, his mind racing through possible responses. Every fiber of his being told him to follow her inside, but direct disobedience of royal instructions would end his career and potentially compromise whatever operation was unfolding. Instead, he contacted headquarters and requested immediate backup. The response was swift but puzzling. Stand down and maintain current position until further notice. When he pressed for clarification, he was told the order came from the highest levels of government. Through the cafe window, he watched as the princess took a seat across from the young man. Their conversation appeared intense, with both participants leaning forward across the small table. The man occasionally glanced toward the window, and each time he did, Beaton noted the professional way his eyes swept the street for potential threats. After 15 minutes that felt like hours, the princess stood to leave. As she did, the young man briefly took her hand and said something that made her nod solemnly. When she emerged from the cafe, her face was set in lines of grim determination. "Thank you for your patience, Inspector," she said, as she settled back into the passenger seat. "Now I believe it's time to return home." The drive back to Gatcombe Park passed in tense silence. Beaton kept checking his mirrors, noting that the white van was now following them at a discreet distance. He also spotted at least 2 other vehicles that seemed to be maintaining surveillance, creating a loose convoy that surrounded their car without appearing obviously threatening. As they approached the estate gates, the princess suddenly spoke. "Inspector, I want you to promise me something." "Of course, Your Highness." "Whatever happens in the coming days, remember that sometimes the greatest act of loyalty requires us to question the orders we're given. Truth and justice don't always align with official policy." Before Beaton could ask what she meant, his radio crackled to life. "Unit 7, this is Control. Report status immediately." He glanced at the princess, who nodded her permission. "Unit 7 to Control. Returning to base with package secure. No incidents to report. Understood, Unit 7. New orders. Maintain close protection at all times. No exceptions. Confirm receipt." "Confirmed, Control." As they passed through the estate gates, Beaton noticed that the surveillance vehicles had taken up positions at strategic points around the property's perimeter. Whatever was happening, it was clear that both sides, whoever they represented, were now in position. The princess seemed to notice the increased security presence as well. "It's beginning," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "What's beginning, Your Highness?" She turned to look at him with eyes that held a mixture of sadness and resolve. "The test of everything we believe in, Inspector. Everything we've sworn to protect." As they pulled up to the main house, Beaton realized that the quiet morning had been the calm before a storm. Whatever forces had been set in motion by the day's events, there would be no going back. The princess's cryptic words echoed in his mind as he helped her from the car. "Sometimes duty requires us to make difficult choices." He had no idea that within hours he would be faced with the most difficult choice of his career, one that would test not only his professional skills but his personal convictions about loyalty, duty, and the meaning of service. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change all of their lives forever, and Inspector Jim Beaton was about to discover that protecting the royal family sometimes meant protecting them from the very institutions they represented. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the estate as Inspector Beaton maintained his patrol around Gatcombe Park's main house. 3 hours had passed since their return from the village, and the tension in the air seemed to thicken with each passing minute. The princess had retreated to her private study, claiming she needed to review some correspondence. But Beaton could see her pacing back and forth through the tall windows. His secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from headquarters. "Operation Blackbird active. Maintain radio silence except for emergencies. New handler arriving 1600 hours." The message immediately deleted itself after he read it, leaving him staring at a blank screen and wondering what exactly Operation Blackbird entailed. At precisely 4 o'clock, a sleek black Mercedes wound its way up the graveled drive. Beaton recognized the driver immediately. Commander Sarah Welsh, one of the highest-ranking protection officers in the Metropolitan Police. Her presence at Gatcombe Park could only mean one thing. The situation had escalated beyond normal protocols. Commander Welsh stepped out of the vehicle with the crisp efficiency that had made her a legend in law enforcement circles. At 55, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had spent 3 decades dealing with the most sensitive security matters in the country. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her sharp green eyes missed nothing as they surveyed the estate grounds. "Inspector Beaton," she said as he approached, "we need to talk, privately." They walked to a secluded corner of the formal gardens, well away from any windows or potential listening devices. Commander Welsh glanced around once more before speaking in a low, urgent tone. "How much do you know about the princess's activities over the past 6 months?" she asked. "Everything relevant to her security, ma'am. I maintain detailed logs of all her movements, contacts, and engagements. I'm not talking about official functions, Inspector. I'm talking about the unauthorized meetings, the private phone calls, the sudden changes in her behavior patterns." Beaton felt a chill of realization. "You've been watching her." "We've been watching everyone, Inspector. That's what we do when national security is at stake." Commander Welsh pulled out a tablet and showed him a series of photographs. These were taken over the past 4 months. "Care to explain what you see?" The images showed Princess Anne at various locations around London and the countryside, always with the same young man from the cafe. In some photos, they were walking through Hyde Park, deep in conversation. In others, they were sitting in restaurants or standing outside government buildings. The final photo showed them embracing outside what appeared to be a private residence. "I don't understand," Beaton said, though a sick feeling was growing in his stomach. "The princess never mentioned these meetings to me, because she knew you would have to report them, and she couldn't let that happen." Commander Welsh swiped to a new screen showing classified intelligence reports. "The man in these photographs is David Crawford, a freelance journalist with connections to several international news organizations. More importantly, he's been investigating a story that could bring down the government." Beaton stared at the intelligence profile. Crawford had an impressive background: Oxford education, former military service, impeccable reputation for accuracy in his reporting. But the red flags in his file were deeply troubling. Suspected of receiving classified information from government sources, under surveillance by multiple agencies, considered a threat to national security. "What story?" Beaton asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. Commander Welsh hesitated before responding. 2 years ago, a joint operation between British and American intelligence agencies resulted in the deaths of 17 civilians in a small Middle Eastern village. The operation was authorized at the highest levels of government, but the public was told it was a terrorist attack by local militia groups. The implications hit Beaton like a physical blow, and Crawford has proof that we were responsible. He has documents, photographs, intercepted communications, everything needed to expose not only the operation, but the cover-up that followed. The kind of evidence that would topple the current government and destroy Britain's relationship with our most important allies. Beaton's mind raced as pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. The princess has been helping him. Her position gives her access to information that would otherwise be impossible to obtain. Royal family members receive intelligence briefings, attend classified meetings, have private conversations with heads of state. If she's been sharing that information, she's committed treason, Beaton finished quietly. At the very least. But more than that, she's put herself in extreme danger. The people who authorized the original operation won't hesitate to protect themselves, regardless of who gets hurt in the process. Commander Welsh closed the tablet and fixed Beaton with a steady stare. Which brings us to why I'm here. In approximately 2 hours, Princess Anne is going to receive a phone call. She'll be told that Crawford has been arrested and is being held at a secure location outside London. She'll be given an address and told to come alone if she wants to see him alive. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap, but she doesn't know that. And based on our psychological profile, she'll go anyway. Her sense of duty and personal loyalty won't allow her to abandon someone who trusted her, even if it means walking into obvious danger. What do you want me to do? Your job, Inspector. Protect the princess at all costs. But understand that all costs may include protecting her from her own government. The weight of what she was asking settled over him like a lead blanket. You're telling me to choose between my oath to protect the royal family and my duty to follow lawful orders from my superiors. I'm telling you that sometimes those two duties conflict, and when they do, you have to decide what kind of man you want to be. Commander Welsh placed a hand on his shoulder. The operation tonight isn't sanctioned by the Royal Protection Unit. It's not even officially sanctioned by the government. It's being run by people who operate in the shadows, people who make problems disappear. Can't we just arrest Crawford ourselves? Remove the threat without putting the princess in danger? Crawford disappeared 3 days ago. We believe he's already dead, but they need the princess to believe otherwise long enough to lure her to the meeting point. Once they have her, they can make both problems disappear permanently. The casual way Commander Welsh spoke about murder made Beaton's blood run cold. This is madness. We're talking about a member of the royal family. We're talking about politics, Inspector, and in politics, even royalty can become expendable when the stakes are high enough. They walked back toward the main house in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they approached the front entrance, Beaton noticed increased activity around the estate's perimeter. The surveillance teams were repositioning themselves, creating what looked suspiciously like a containment perimeter rather than a protective one. How many people are involved in this operation? He asked. Fewer than you might think, but more than enough to ensure success. The beauty of using unofficial assets is that if something goes wrong, there's no paper trail leading back to anyone important. Inside the house, they could see Princess Anne still pacing in her study. Occasionally, she would pause at her desk to examine some document or photograph, then resume her restless movement. Her behavior suggested someone wrestling with a momentous decision. When the call comes, Commander Welsh said quietly, she'll have perhaps 30 minutes to prepare and leave. The meeting point is an abandoned warehouse complex about 40 minutes from here. Officially, you'll receive orders to stand down and allow her to leave unaccompanied. Officially, no protection officers will follow her. And unofficially? Unofficially, you'll have to decide whether you're willing to risk your career, your freedom, and possibly your life to do what you know is right. A movement in one of the upstairs windows caught Beaton's attention. A figure in dark clothing was moving through what should have been an empty room. Commander, we have unauthorized personnel in the house. Commander Welsh followed his gaze and swore softly. They're moving ahead of schedule. The call must have already come through. Even as she spoke, they could see Princess Anne answering her phone in the study. Her face went white as she listened to whoever was on the other end. She asked several sharp questions, then sat down heavily in her chair, staring at the phone long after the call had ended. What now? Beaton asked. Now we find out what kind of protection officer you really are, Inspector. Princess Anne emerged from the study 15 minutes later, moving with the purposeful stride of someone who had made an irreversible decision. She had changed into dark clothing and comfortable shoes, clearly preparing for something other than an official engagement. Inspector Beaton, she called as she spotted him in the main hallway. I'll be going out this evening. Personal business that requires no official protection. Your Highness, I'm afraid I can't allow that. Standing orders, she interrupted, can be modified when circumstances require it, and these circumstances definitely require it. Her phone buzzed with a text message. After reading it, her jaw tightened with determination. They want me to leave within the hour. Alone. Beaton exchanged a quick glance with Commander Welsh, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Your Highness, perhaps we could discuss this privately? The princess looked between them, and Beaton saw her intelligent mind working through the implications of the commander's presence. You know, don't you? You know what this is about. We know enough, Commander Welsh replied carefully. We know you're walking into a situation that's designed to eliminate both you and the story you've been trying to help expose. David is still alive? We don't believe so, Your Highness. We think he's been dead for days, possibly weeks. This meeting is being set up to neutralize the final loose end. You. The princess closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them again, they blazed with anger. Then they've underestimated me. I have copies of everything David gathered. If something happens to me, those documents will be released automatically. Dead man's switch? Commander Welsh asked. Something like that. But more importantly, I'm not going to let them win. Too many people have died already because of what happened in that village. The truth has to come out, regardless of the political consequences. Beaton felt a surge of admiration for her courage, even as he recognized the futility of her position. Your Highness, even if you're right about the documents, walking into that warehouse won't accomplish anything except getting you killed. But it will also prove that they're willing to murder a member of the royal family to protect their secrets. That evidence might be worth more than any documents. The sound of vehicles approaching made all three of them tense. Through the front windows, they could see two black SUVs pulling up the drive. Men in tactical gear were already deploying around the house's perimeter. The containment team, Commander Welsh murmured. They're making sure she doesn't have any choice but to go to the meeting. Princess Anne straightened her shoulders with royal dignity. Then I suppose it's time to leave.
Your Highness, Beaton said urgently. There has to be another way.
We can contact the media ourselves, release the story without you having to walk into a trap. You don't understand, Inspector. It's not just about the documents anymore. It's about proving that no one, not the government, not intelligence agencies, not anyone, is above the law, not even if they wear a crown. The tactical team was positioning themselves at all the house's exits. Whatever choice they were going to make, it had to be made now. Commander Welsh pulled out her radio and spoke in a code that Beaton didn't recognize. After a moment, she turned back to them. There's a service tunnel that runs from the wine cellar to the old stables. It was built during World War II as an escape route. If we move now, we can get the princess out without the containment team seeing us. And then what? Beaton asked. Then we go to the warehouse and spring the trap from the inside instead of walking into it blindly. You're willing to risk your careers to help me? Ma'am, Commander Welsh replied, some things are more important than careers. The truth is one of them. As they prepared to descend to the wine cellar, Beaton realized that the next few hours would determine not only the princess's fate, but the future of the monarchy itself. The documents she was trying to protect could reshape the government, but the manner of her response to this crisis would define what it truly meant to serve the crown. The real test was just beginning. The wine cellar beneath Gatcombe Park hadn't been used for its original purpose in decades. Dusty bottles lined the stone walls, their labels illegible in the dim light cast by Commander Welsh's tactical flashlight. The air smelled of damp earth and forgotten time, and their footsteps echoed softly as they made their way toward the far wall where the secret tunnel entrance was hidden behind a false wine rack. Inspector Beaton helped Princess Anne navigate the uneven stone floor, while Commander Welsh worked to locate the hidden mechanism that would open the passage. The princess moved with surprising calm considering the circumstances, though Beaton could see the tension in her shoulders and the way her hands trembled slightly in the flashlight beam. "Found it," Commander Welsh whispered, pressing a sequence of stones in the wall. With a grinding sound that seemed impossibly loud in the confined space, a section of the wall swung inward to reveal a narrow tunnel barely tall enough for an adult to stand upright. This passage was dug in 1943, the princess said quietly as they prepared to enter. My great-aunt used to tell stories about hiding down here during the war, listening to the bombers pass overhead. She said it taught her that even the highest walls couldn't protect you from the world's problems forever. The tunnel stretched into blackness ahead of them, its rough-hewn walls glistening with moisture. They moved single file, with Commander Welsh leading the way and Beaton bringing up the rear. The princess walked between them, her breathing steady despite the obvious strain of their situation. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, they reached the tunnel's end. Commander Welsh carefully opened the concealed exit and peered out into what had once been the estate's working stables. The building had been converted years ago into storage space, and crates and equipment provided excellent cover as they emerged from their underground passage. The containment team will have realized we're gone by now, Commander Welsh said, checking her watch. We have perhaps 10 minutes before they start expanding their search perimeter. Through gaps in the stable's weathered wooden walls, they could see the tactical teams beginning to reposition themselves around the main house. Spotlights were being set up, and the distant sound of radio chatter suggested a significant escalation in their operation. They're treating this like a terrorist incident, Beaton observed grimly. Because that's what they've been ordered to believe, Commander Welsh replied. The teams on the ground probably think they're dealing with a kidnapping or assassination attempt. Only the people at the very top know what's really happening. Princess Anne moved to one of the gaps in the wall and studied the activity around the house. How many innocent people are going to be hurt because of this? That depends on how far the people behind this are willing to go, Commander Welsh said. But I suspect we'll find out soon enough. A new sound reached their ears, the distinctive whop-whop-whop of helicopter rotors approaching from the south. Through the stable's broken skylight, they could see the aircraft's searchlight sweeping across the estate grounds. Military helicopter, Beaton identified. Special Air Service from the sound of it. This is escalating beyond anything I anticipated, Commander Welsh admitted, her composed demeanor showing its first cracks. Whoever authorized this operation has resources that go well beyond normal intelligence agencies. The helicopter circled the estate twice before settling into a hover pattern directly above the main house. Its searchlight continued to probe the grounds, occasionally pausing on areas where thermal imaging might have detected movement. "We can't stay here," Princess Anne said with quiet authority. "Every minute we delay gives them more time to close off our options." Commander Welsh nodded reluctantly. "The warehouse is 40 minutes away by car, but we obviously can't use the main roads now. I know some backcountry routes, but it will take us at least an hour, maybe more. Then we'd better get started." They made their way carefully through the stored equipment toward the stable's rear exit. Commander Welsh had cached a nondescript Volkswagen behind the building, hidden under a canvas tarp and surrounded by farm machinery that would help conceal their departure. As they prepared to leave, Beaton's radio crackled to life with an encrypted message. He listened carefully, then turned to the others with a grim expression. "Crawford is definitely dead," he reported. "His body was found this morning in a flat in Southwark. Apparent suicide, but the forensics team is reporting irregularities that suggest otherwise." Princess Anne closed her eyes and leaned against the car for a moment. "I was afraid of that. David was many things, but he wasn't suicidal. He believed too strongly in the importance of the truth." The message also confirmed that the warehouse meeting is a setup, Beaton continued. "Multiple teams are already in position there, waiting for you to arrive." "How many teams?" Commander Welsh asked. "At least 3 different groups. Government agents, private contractors, and what appear to be foreign operatives. Whatever happens at that warehouse, they want to make sure there are no witnesses left to contradict their version of events." The complexity of the situation was becoming clear. This wasn't just about covering up a military operation gone wrong. It was about protecting relationships between allied intelligence agencies and maintaining the delicate balance of international politics. The princess had stumbled into something much larger than she'd realized. "There's something else," Princess Anne said quietly. "Something I haven't told either of you yet." They turned to look at her, and in the dim light, her face showed a mixture of determination and fear that neither of them had seen before. "The documents that David gathered, they don't just prove what happened in that village. They show a pattern of operations over the past 5 years, all authorized at the highest levels, all covered up afterward. We're not talking about one incident. We're talking about systematic execution of civilians in multiple countries." The magnitude of what she was describing hit them like a physical blow. This wasn't just about protecting a government's reputation. It was about covering up what amounted to war crimes committed by democratic nations that claimed to respect human rights and international law. "Jesus!" Beaton whispered. "No wonder they're willing to kill to protect this secret." "The worst part," the princess continued, "is that some of these operations were carried out with the knowledge and approval of the royal household. My own family has blood on their hands." Commander Welsh stared at her in shock. "You're saying the Queen knew about this?" "I'm saying that the monarchy has become complicit in activities that violate everything we claim to represent, and I can't be part of that anymore." The helicopter's searchlight suddenly swept across their position, and all 3 of them froze as the beam passed just over their heads. For a terrifying moment, it seemed as though they'd been spotted, but the light continued its search pattern without stopping. "We have to go now," Commander Welsh urged. "Every second we stay here increases the risk of discovery." They climbed quickly into the Volkswagen, with Commander Welsh taking the driver's seat and the princess beside her in the front. Beaton settled into the back seat, his mind still reeling from the princess's revelations about the scope of the conspiracy they were facing. The car started on the second try, and they began their careful journey through the network of farm tracks and country lanes that would hopefully keep them hidden from the increasingly sophisticated search operation developing around Gatcombe Park. As they drove through the darkening countryside, Princess Anne began to explain more about what she'd learned from Crawford and his investigation. The picture that emerged was even more disturbing than Beaton had imagined. The original operation that had killed 17 civilians was just one part of a broader program designed to eliminate threats to Western interests in strategically important regions. The targets weren't always combatants or terrorists. Sometimes they were journalists, human rights activists, or local officials who had uncovered information that could embarrass Allied governments. David had documented at least 12 separate incidents over the past 5 years, the princess explained. Each one was carefully planned to look like an accident, terrorist attack, or local conflict. The common thread was that they all eliminated someone who posed a threat to intelligence operations or political relationships. And the royal family's involvement? Commander Welsh asked. Consultation and approval for operations that took place in Commonwealth countries or former colonies. The fiction is that the monarchy has no real political power, but when it comes to intelligence operations, that's not entirely true. The Crown's approval provides legal cover for activities that would otherwise be questionable under international law. Beaton felt sick as he realized the implications. So by trying to expose this, you're not just threatening the current government, you're threatening the entire constitutional structure of the monarchy. Exactly. Which is why they're willing to go to such extreme lengths to stop me. Their route took them through small villages and past farmhouses where lights were beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. The normalcy of the countryside scenes contrasted sharply with the deadly serious nature of their situation. Somewhere behind them, multiple government agencies were mobilizing resources to hunt them down, while ahead of them lay a trap designed to eliminate the last threat to one of the most sensitive secrets in British intelligence history. What's our plan when we reach the warehouse? Beaton asked. Commander Welsh glanced at him in the rearview mirror. We don't walk into their trap on their terms. Instead, we turn the tables and spring our own trap on them. How? By giving them exactly what they want. Princess Anne arriving at the warehouse at the appointed time. But instead of walking in alone and defenseless, she'll be accompanied by the 2 people who are sworn to protect her, and we'll be the ones controlling the situation. Princess Anne turned to look at both of them. You're willing to risk your lives for this? You understand that if we succeed, it will mean the end of your careers at minimum. If we fail, we'll probably all be dead. Commander Welsh finished matter-of-factly. But some things are worth dying for, Your Highness. The truth is one of them. As they continued through the darkness toward their appointment with destiny, none of them could know that their actions over the next few hours would not only determine their own fates, but would set in motion events that would reshape the relationship between the British monarchy and the modern world. The warehouse ahead represented more than just a trap. It was the stage where centuries of tradition would collide with contemporary moral responsibility. The final act was about to begin. The industrial warehouse district on the outskirts of Birmingham looked like a graveyard of British manufacturing in the pale moonlight. Abandoned buildings stretched in every direction, their broken windows staring blindly across empty parking lots littered with debris. The Volkswagen's headlights cut through the darkness as Commander Welsh navigated the maze of access roads leading to the specified meeting point. Building 47, she said quietly, checking the address against a hand-drawn map. 3 stories, multiple entrances, perfect for an ambush. Inspector Beaton studied the structure through binoculars as they parked 200 meters away behind a cluster of shipping containers. The warehouse appeared deserted, but his trained eye picked out subtle signs of occupation. Vehicles parked in positions that provided quick escape routes, the faint glow of equipment lights in upper windows, and movement patterns that suggested coordinated surveillance. I count at least 6 different observation points, he reported. They've had time to prepare. Princess Anne sat quietly in the front seat, her hands folded in her lap with deceptive calm. She had changed into dark tactical clothing provided by Commander Welsh, and her hair was pulled back under a black watch cap. In the dim light, she looked more like a special forces operative than a member of the royal family. The meeting was supposed to be in the main warehouse floor at 11 o'clock, she said, checking her watch. It's 10:40 now. Commander Welsh activated a small tactical radio, and spoke in code to someone Beaton couldn't identify. After a brief exchange, she turned back to them with a grim smile. "The cavalry is en route, but they're still 20 minutes out. We're going to have to start this dance without backup." "What cavalry?" Beaton asked. "Friends in high places who are as tired of this corruption as we are. Members of parliament, military officers, intelligence analysts, people who joined the system to serve their country, not to become accessories to murder." The scope of the conspiracy was becoming clearer. This wasn't just about exposing a cover-up. It was about a fundamental struggle for the soul of British intelligence services. Princess Anne's investigation had uncovered not just evidence of crimes, but proof that the institutions meant to protect democracy had been corrupted into instruments of oppression. "The documents Crawford compiled," Princess Anne said. "They're not just about what happened in that village. They show how intelligence agencies have been conducting what amounts to a shadow war against their own citizens, journalists who ask uncomfortable questions, politicians who push for transparency, activists who challenge corporate interests. They all become targets." "How does it work?" Beaton asked. "Surveillance first, then character assassination through leaked information or manufactured scandals. If that doesn't work, they escalate to more direct methods. Car accidents, apparent suicides, sudden illnesses, anything that can be explained away as natural causes or personal tragedy." Commander Welsh checked her equipment one final time. The beautiful part of the system is its deniability. The people giving the orders never directly authorize violence. They just identify problems and let subordinates find solutions. Everyone involved can honestly claim they never explicitly ordered anyone's death. A new set of headlights appeared in the distance, approaching the warehouse complex from the opposite direction. Through his binoculars, Beaton watched as a black sedan parked near the main entrance. Two figures emerged and began walking toward the building with the measured pace of professionals conducting business. "Showtime," Commander Welsh murmured. They left the Volkswagen and began their approach to the warehouse, using shipping containers and abandoned machinery as cover. The princess moved with surprising stealth for someone without military training, clearly drawing on skills Beaton hadn't known she possessed. "Where did you learn to move like that?" he whispered as they paused behind a concrete barrier. "Sandhurst," she replied quietly. "Women weren't officially allowed in combat training when I was there, but some of the instructors believed in preparing us for reality anyway." The main warehouse entrance was clearly visible from their position, illuminated by harsh security lights that created deep shadows beyond their reach. More vehicles had arrived, positioning themselves in a loose perimeter that would prevent anyone from leaving once the meeting began. Commander Welsh signaled for them to stop and activated her radio again. This time, Beaton could hear both sides of the conversation. "Blackbird leader, this is base. Do you have eyes on the package?" "Confirmed base. Package is mobile and approaching target zone. Be advised, multiple hostile elements are in position." "Understood." "Blackbird leader. Green light for operation. Rules of engagement are weapons free if threatened." "Copy that, base." Beginning final approach now. As they prepared to move closer to the warehouse, Beaton's phone vibrated with an encrypted text message. The sender was identified only as Whitehall source, but the content made his blood run cold. "Operation compromised. Your commander is not who you think she is. Get the princess away from the warehouse immediately. Trust no one." He stared at the message for a moment, his mind racing through the implications. Commander Welsh had been the one to reveal the trap, the one to guide their escape from Gatcombe Park, the one with backup forces supposedly en route to help them. But she also had access to encrypted communications, detailed knowledge of intelligence operations, and resources that seemed far beyond what a metropolitan police commander should possess. "Commander," he said quietly, "I need to speak with you privately for a moment."
She turned to look at him, and in the harsh security lighting, her face seemed different somehow.
"Harder. More calculating." "What is it, Inspector?" "I just received some intelligence that suggests we may have a problem with operational security." Her hand moved almost imperceptibly toward her sidearm. "What kind of problem?" Before Beaton could respond, Princess Anne's voice cut through the tension. "David's alive." She was looking through a pair of night vision binoculars at the warehouse's upper windows, and her voice carried a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Third floor?" Second window from the left. I can see him clearly. He's tied to a chair, but he's definitely alive. Commander Welsh took the binoculars and studied the window for a long moment. When she lowered them, her expression had changed completely. The professional mask had slipped, revealing something much colder underneath. Yes, he's alive, she confirmed, for now. The casual way she said it sent alarm bells ringing in Beaton's mind. Commander, what exactly is your role in this operation? She smiled without humor. My role, Inspector, is to make sure that Princess Anne walks into that warehouse and doesn't walk out again. The original plan was to let her think she was rescuing Crawford, then eliminate them both in what would appear to be a tragic hostage rescue gone wrong. Beaton's hand moved toward his weapon, but Commander Welsh was faster. Her pistol appeared in her hand with professional smoothness, trained on Princess Anne rather than him. I wouldn't, Inspector. Your devotion to duty is admirable, but this situation is far beyond your ability to control. You're working for them, Princess Anne said, her voice steady despite the gun pointed at her. You've been working for them all along. I've been working for the stability of the nation, Your Highness. Sometimes that requires making difficult choices about individual lives, including the lives of innocent civilians in foreign countries, especially those lives when they threaten strategic interests that protect millions of British citizens. The philosophical argument was interrupted by the sound of approaching vehicles. Several sets of headlights were converging on their position from multiple directions, and the sound of helicopter rotors was growing louder overhead. Your backup? Beaton asked. The real backup, Commander Welsh confirmed. People who understand that some secrets are worth protecting at any cost. A new voice spoke from the darkness behind them. Stand down, Commander. This operation is terminated. They turned to see a figure emerging from behind a shipping container, silhouetted against the distant warehouse lights. As the person moved closer, Beaton recognized the silver hair and authoritative bearing of Sir Geoffrey, the mysterious official who had visited Princess Anne that morning. Sir Geoffrey, Commander Welsh said, her weapon still trained on the princess. I wasn't expecting you to be here personally. Change of plans, Commander. New intelligence suggests that eliminating the princess would create more problems than it solves. What kind of new intelligence? Sir Geoffrey stepped into the light, and Beaton could see that he was flanked by armed operatives in tactical gear. The kind that indicates Princess Anne's death would trigger the automatic release of not just Crawford's documents, but additional evidence that would expose this entire operation. We monitored all her communications, tracked all her contacts. There's no dead man's switch. Princess Anne spoke quietly from where she stood with the gun still pointed at her. You monitored my official communications, Commander, but you didn't monitor the ones I conducted using my grandmother's old intelligence network from World War II. The revelation hung in the air like a bombshell. Queen Elizabeth had maintained contact with former resistance fighters and intelligence operatives throughout Europe well into her reign, ostensibly for historical purposes. But those networks had remained active, operating parallel to official intelligence agencies and answerable only to the Crown. Impossible, Commander Welsh repeated, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. 27 former operatives in 12 countries, Princess Anne continued calmly. All of them with copies of Crawford's complete files. All of them with instructions to release everything to international media if anything happens to me. You can't reach them all, and you can't silence them all. Sir Geoffrey nodded approvingly, which is why this operation is now terminated, and why we need to find a different solution to our problem. What kind of solution? Beaton asked, though he suspected he wasn't going to like the answer. The kind that involves Princess Anne disappearing permanently, but not through death. A carefully staged breakdown, perhaps, followed by voluntary withdrawal from public life. Medical treatment in a private facility where she can receive the care she obviously needs. The euphemism was clear. They were talking about a lifetime of imprisonment disguised as medical care, a solution that would remove the threat while avoiding the complications that would arise from her death. I won't agree to that, Princess Anne said firmly. Your Highness, Sir Geoffrey replied with false sympathy. I'm afraid you may not have a choice in the matter. The sound of approaching helicopters was getting louder, and vehicle lights were beginning to surround their position. Whatever choice they were going to make, it had to be made immediately. In the distance, the warehouse lights suddenly went out, plunging the entire complex into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in seconds later, but in that brief moment of complete blackness, everything changed. When Beaton's night vision adjusted, he realized that the balance of power had shifted dramatically. The approaching vehicles belonged to military units, but they were surrounding Sir Geoffrey's teams rather than supporting them. The helicopters overhead were broadcasting demands for surrender, not providing air support for the operation. Commander Welsh's radio crackled with urgent messages. All units stand down immediately. Operation Blackbird is terminated by order of the Prime Minister. Repeat, all units stand down. What's happening? She demanded. Princess Anne smiled for the first time since the ordeal began. Democracy is happening, Commander. The real cavalry has arrived. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the warehouse complex as Inspector Beaton watched the last of the detention vehicles disappear into the distance. Commander Welsh, Sir Geoffrey, and 17 other operatives were now in custody, charged with conspiracy, attempted murder, and violations of the Official Secrets Act. The operation that was meant to silence Princess Anne had instead become the catalyst for the largest intelligence scandal in British history. Princess Anne stood beside a military ambulance, watching as paramedics finished examining David Crawford. The journalist had survived his ordeal, though he bore the physical and emotional scars of 3 days in captivity. His captors had kept him alive as bait, never realizing that his apparent vulnerability was actually their greatest weakness. "How did you know?" Beaton asked the princess, as Crawford was helped into the ambulance for transport to a secure hospital. "How did you know they wouldn't actually kill him until they had you?" "Because David was too valuable as leverage," she replied, her voice hoarse from exhaustion but steady with conviction. "They needed me to believe he was in immediate danger, but they also needed him alive to prove they had him. The moment they killed him, they lost their primary tool for controlling my actions." A black sedan approached their position, and Beaton recognized the Prime Minister's official vehicle. The events of the night had reached the highest levels of government, and the political ramifications were still unfolding. Several cabinet ministers had already resigned, and Parliament was being called into emergency session. Prime Minister Margaret Whitfield emerged from the sedan with the bearing of someone who had spent the night making impossible decisions. At 62, she had built her career on careful political calculations, but the evidence presented by Princess Anne's investigation had forced her to choose between political survival and moral responsibility. "Your Royal Highness," she said with a formal bow that somehow conveyed both respect and genuine gratitude, "I owe you an apology on behalf of the government and the nation. The apology should go to the families of the people who died because of these operations." Princess Anne replied firmly, "I was just the messenger. Nevertheless, your courage in bringing this to light has prevented a grave injustice from continuing." The Prime Minister turned to address Beaton directly. "Inspector, your actions tonight went well beyond the call of duty. The Royal Protection Unit should be proud of officers like yourself." Beaton felt uncomfortable with the praise, knowing how close he had come to following orders that would have made him complicit in the conspiracy. "I was just doing my job, Prime Minister. Your job was to protect the princess from physical harm," she corrected. "What you did was protect the integrity of the institution she represents." That required courage that goes far beyond job descriptions. As they spoke, teams of forensic specialists were processing the warehouse for evidence. The facility had been used for more than just holding Crawford. Investigators had found documentation of multiple operations, communication equipment linking to intelligence agencies across Europe, and financial records showing the flow of money through a network of private contractors and offshore accounts. "How extensive was the conspiracy?" Princess Anne asked. Prime Minister Whitfield consulted a briefing file before answering. "Based on preliminary investigations, we believe it involved elements from 5 different intelligence agencies, at least 12 private military contractors, and government officials in 7 countries. The scope is still being determined, but it appears to have been active for nearly a decade." The magnitude of what they had uncovered was staggering. This wasn't just about covering up a single operation that had gone wrong. It was about an entire shadow network that had been operating parallel to legitimate government institutions, answerable to no democratic oversight, and funded through channels that bypassed normal budgetary controls. "What happens now?" Beaton asked. "Now comes the hardest part," the Prime Minister replied grimly. We have to dismantle a network that has tentacles reaching into every major intelligence service in the Western world, while somehow maintaining the international relationships that are essential to our national security. A helicopter approached from the south, bearing the distinctive markings of the Royal Air Force. As it settled onto the warehouse's parking lot, Beaton realized that this crisis had reached the very highest levels of the British establishment. Queen Elizabeth herself emerged from the helicopter, accompanied by her private secretary and 2 protection officers. At 96, she moved with the careful dignity of extreme age, but her eyes were sharp and alert as she surveyed the scene. Her presence transformed the warehouse complex into an impromptu throne room, and everyone present straightened unconsciously. "Grandmother," Princess Anne said, moving forward to greet the monarch. "Anne," the Queen replied, her voice carrying decades of experience with constitutional crises. "I understand you've been rather busy." "I've been doing what I thought was right, Your Majesty. It's what we trained you for, after all." The casual way the Queen acknowledged her granddaughter's actions sent ripples of understanding through the assembled officials. This hadn't been a rogue operation by a rebellious royal. It had been sanctioned at the highest level of the monarchy itself. "Your Majesty," Prime Minister Whitfield said carefully, "are you saying that you knew about Princess Anne's investigation?" "I knew that certain elements within our intelligence services had exceeded their authority," the Queen replied with characteristic understatement. "I also knew that conventional oversight mechanisms had proven inadequate to address the problem." Beaton began to understand the true scope of what had transpired. The royal family's involvement in intelligence matters wasn't just ceremonial. It provided a parallel channel of oversight that could operate when normal governmental controls failed. Princess Anne's investigation hadn't been an act of rebellion. It had been an act of service. The documents that Crawford compiled, the Queen continued, were shared with certain trusted individuals throughout the Commonwealth, not to create an international incident, but to ensure that if anything happened to either him or my granddaughter, the truth would still emerge.
The Resistance Network, Beaton realized.
You used your grandmother's old intelligence contacts. Networks built during wartime tend to be remarkably durable, the Queen confirmed with a slight smile. They also tend to be rather passionate about protecting democracy from those who would subvert it. The morning continued with a series of briefings and debriefings as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. Intelligence officers who had been following orders without questioning their source found themselves facing charges for their participation in illegal activities. Government officials who had provided oversight discovered that they had been manipulated by false intelligence reports. Military contractors who had carried out operations found themselves abandoned by the political masters who had authorized their actions. By noon, the story was beginning to break in the international media. Crawford, speaking from his hospital bed, had provided exclusive interviews to journalists in 12 countries simultaneously. The coordinated release ensured that no single government could suppress the story through legal or political pressure. The political aftershocks were immediate and severe. The Foreign Secretary resigned within hours, followed by the Defense Secretary and the Director General of MI6. Several members of Parliament called for a complete restructuring of intelligence oversight, while international allies demanded explanations for operations that had been conducted without their knowledge or consent. "What will happen to you?" Beaton asked Princess Anne as they watched the media circus unfolding around the warehouse complex. "I expect there will be consequences," she replied calmly. "Actions like this always have consequences, even when they're necessary." "What kind of consequences?" "Political pressure to step back from public duties, probably. Questions about whether the monarchy can be trusted with access to sensitive information. Demands for constitutional reforms that would limit royal involvement in government affairs." The prospect didn't seem to particularly distress her, and Beaton realized that she had calculated these costs before beginning her investigation. She had been willing to sacrifice her own position to protect the principles that the monarchy was supposed to represent. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "I regret that it was necessary," she said thoughtfully. "I regret that institutions created to protect democracy had become instruments for subverting it. I regret that good people died because other good people were following orders without questioning their moral implications. But not the investigation itself. Not for a moment. The truth is worth the cost, Inspector." It's always worth the cost. As the afternoon progressed, the full scope of the international ramifications became clear. Several NATO allies had conducted similar operations, all coordinated through the same shadow network that had been exposed. The European Parliament called for emergency sessions to discuss intelligence oversight. The United Nations Security Council scheduled debates on accountability for unauthorized military actions. The warehouse complex, which 12 hours earlier had been the site of a deadly trap, had become the epicenter of a global conversation about the balance between security and accountability in democratic societies. "This is just the beginning," Princess Anne said as they prepared to leave the site. "Exposing the conspiracy was the easy part. Now comes the real work of rebuilding institutions that can be trusted to serve democracy rather than undermine it." Beaton looked around at the controlled chaos of investigators, journalists, and government officials who were still processing the night's events. Will it work? Can the system really be reformed? "I don't know," she admitted, "but I know that the alternative, allowing the corruption to continue, was unacceptable. Sometimes you have to act on faith that people will choose to do the right thing when they're given the chance." As they walked toward the helicopter that would return them to London, Beaton reflected on the events of the past 24 hours. He had begun the day as a protection officer following routine protocols. He was ending it as a participant in a constitutional crisis that would reshape the relationship between the monarchy and the modern world. "Inspector," Princess Anne said as they reached the aircraft, "I want you to know that your actions today represented the very best traditions of the Royal Protection Unit. You protected not just my physical safety, but the principles that make the monarchy worth protecting." "I was just doing my job, Your Royal Highness." "No," she corrected with a smile that was both sad and proud. "You were doing much more than that. You were proving that loyalty to the crown means loyalty to what it stands for, not blind obedience to those who claim to speak for it." As the helicopter lifted off, carrying them away from the warehouse and toward an uncertain future, Beaton realized that the true test of their actions wouldn't be measured in arrests made or conspiracies exposed. It would be measured in whether the institutions they had fought to protect could be rebuilt in a way that honored both security needs and democratic values. The princess had risked everything to ensure that truth could triumph over expedience. Now it remained to be seen whether that truth would be strong enough to create the lasting changes necessary to prevent future abuses. But as they flew through the morning sky toward London, Inspector Jim Beaton felt a quiet certainty that they had done the right thing. Sometimes protecting the crown meant protecting it from itself. And sometimes the greatest act of loyalty was the willingness to question the orders you were given. The warehouse had been a trap, but not for Princess Anne. It had been a trap for the conspiracy itself, a place where shadows could no longer hide from the light of truth. And in the end, that light had been enough to illuminate a path toward justice.